Yes.
Yep. Does that mean I'm muted now? It's got to turn red.
It's got to be red.
Okay.
Okay. We are live now. I think both your mics are working pretty well. Welcome, everybody. We have another debate today. It is going to be with Ken Hovind and Bill Ludlow. I actually am going to just mute a little bit because I guess we're getting some background noise. But it is 2:30 my time. It is Friday, July 14th. This one's going to be, is there evidence for human evolution? Part of Bill's debate presentation actually includes a little bit about him. So we're going to skip the openers today. We're going to go right into his presentation. He's going to have about 15, 20 minutes or so to do his presentation. And then Kent's going to get equal time to do his or rebut what Bill has. So we're going to just go straight into it. Bill, the floor is yours. I'm going to present to you as soon as you start with your slides, and we're going to go from there.
All right. Can you see the slide?
I can see them.
Okay. All right. So we're ready to go.
Kent, can you see them? And the audience in the live feed? It appears so.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's a problem, let me know. I'm not a professional scientist, but I am a member of the Geological Society of America, the Southwest Paleontological Society, National Center for Science Education, and I volunteer at the Arizona Museum of Natural History, where I am the Human Origins Specialist in the Origins Gallery down there. I would consider myself a science activist and a science educator. So going right into the presentation, we're going to cover 4 million years of human evolution here. We're going to start with Australopithecus because we definitely want to show pre-human, and I think everybody would agree that Australopiths are pre-human. So starting with everyone's favorite, Lucy, discovered by Donald Johanson in 1974, Australopithecus afarensis. Her species is represented by fossils from over 400 individuals now. They lived in East Africa 3.8 to 2.9 million years ago. Was Lucy a chimp? No, Lucy wasn't a chimp. She was almost as different, or I should say chimps are almost as different from our common ancestor as we are. They've been evolving just as long as we have. So when you take Lucy's skeleton and you flip it over and superimpose it onto itself, it shows actually how complete it really is. Primates are asymmetrical. So we have a very complete skeleton there. Lucy was not a knuckle walker. Knuckle walking evolved after our split with our common ancestor. We see differences in the type of knuckle walking between chimps and gorillas. There's no evidence that Lucy was ever a knuckle walking chimp. Looking at their skulls, cranial capacity ranged from 375 to 530 cc's. The variation is due to sexual dimorphism, where males would be larger than females. And we're going to pay attention to the cranial capacity here as we go along. No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis. So Australopithecus africanus is next up. Tongchild was the first one, discovered in 1924. We believe that skull was of a 3-year-old. They lived in South Africa 3.3 to 2.1 million years ago. Again, several hundred fossil specimens have been found, and they overlapped with afarensis in East Africa just for a few 100,000 years there. Were they a chimp? No, I mean, completely different now. You look at the difference in the skulls. This and Africanus had longer arms and shorter legs than modern humans, but that's because they were a transitional species. Evidence for bipedalism in Australopithecines. We have placement of the foramen magnum at the base of the skull. We have the attachment of neck muscles to the skull, shape of their spine, angle of their knees. They had no divergent big toe, fixed arches in their foot, side to side and front to back, and the shape of the pelvis, which we can tell whether they were bipedal or not by the shape of their pelvis. Cranial capacity averaged 485 cc's. Compared to afarensis, we see already a less projecting face, more rounded skull, no cranial crest, and smaller dentition. So they're getting a little bit closer to us. And again, no modern human remains ever been found in the same layers as afarensis or africanus. Pithecus sediba was a fairly new one, discovered 2008 by 8-year-old Matthew Berger, son of Lee Berger. We're up to 1.98 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Lots of different features to them. I'm not really going to take the time to cover all that. We're going to keep moving right along. Homo habilis, again, just under 2 million years ago, first discovered by the Leakeys in Kubifora, Kenya. And these are the early tool makers. Now, we might have seen evidence with tool makers prior, but this is the first species that's associated with tool making by design, with something with an end product in mind. Chimps might use a rock or a stick, but the closest we've seen them to designing tools is stripping leaves off of a stick to get at termites. These are the Oldowan style tools dating back as far as 2.5 million years, discovered in Oldowan Gorge by Leakeys. Again, an end product in mind, but not a real refined type of tool. Homo rudolfensis, which some people will consider Homo habilis, again at 1.9 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Look at that cranial capacity. Now we're up to 775 cc's. We're seeing a gradual increase here in brain size. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo habilis. Homo erectus, these were the most successful humans so far. They were around for about 1.75 million years. First species to leave Africa. So they were around from 1.89 million years to 143,000 years ago. The early cranial capacity we see on average is 850 cc's, and the later up to 1,100 cc's. So we can see the brains getting larger again. African Homo erectus, some people will call Homo ergaster. This is one at 1.75 million years with a cranial capacity of 850 cc's. Again, most successful human species so far. Homo erectus turcanaboy skull at 1.5 million years, cranial capacity 880 cc's, discovered at Lake Turkana. We've got turcanaboy. We can tell his age. He still had his wisdom teeth, so that's one of the ways we can tell age from some of these bones in the dirt. Male pelvis, long legs, 5 foot 3 inches tall. Asian Homo erectus, this is one of the skulls discovered in Java, but a more recent discovery in 1969, not the early Java man. Cranial capacity there, 1,000 cc's already we're seeing. And just to cover again, if you line these skulls up, Africanus, habilis, erectus, and I do this at the museum when I'm speaking there and talking with children there. It's so obvious that an 8 or 10-year-old can put them back in the right order. I can mix them up and be talking with these kids and ask them to put them back in the right order. I mean, and they'll put them in the right order based on these different transitional features. Again, we're seeing 435 to 530, average 450 cc's on brain size on the Africanus. Homo habilis averages 680. Homo erectus averages 1,000. We're seeing a transition happen right there. And no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo erectus. But what we do find is Acheulean hand axes. Stone tool technology advances with increase in brain size. We see crude hand axes at 1.75 million years, and then as recently as under 1 million years, we start seeing them really get refined. These are found in Asia, Africa, North America. The Native Americans used them. So Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthalensis, and it's all use the same tool technology. So here's heidelbergensis. These are ancestral to Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, and they were around from about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. Again, we're kind of looking at where they fit in the chain of things here. We have lots of remains of these guys. There was 28 individuals dated to 430,000 years old. They used 6 different methods to come up with the date range on those. We've actually pulled DNA out of Homo heidelbergensis. We know that they shared a common ancestor with the Denisovans. We're going to get to them in a minute, but also had Neanderthal-like features. Their skulls from. This is the Cobway skull, and this would be 300,000 years ago. We're getting to now Heidelbergensis. Some would call it Rhodesiensis. So again, African. Sometimes there are people they call splitters that split them into different species, but we still see large brow ridges. But now we're getting a flat face like modern humans. We've got the low brain case profile like Homo erectus, but the brain size is 1,300 cc's. So by 300,000 years ago, we've seen almost modern human average brain size, and no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. The Neanderthals, everybody's favorite caveman here, found in Europe and Western Asia, went extinct by 39,000 years ago. Again, hundreds of fossil specimens found. First discovered in 1829. They didn't know what it was really. The type specimen, Neander 1, is from the Neander Valley. That's where they got their name. But that was discovered in 1856. This is the most complete Neanderthal skull here, discovered in 1909, 70,000 years old. Cranial capacity over 1,600 cc's. So actually, a lot of these early Neanderthals had a brain size larger than modern humans. This is the one that pretty much debunked the earlier theory that that Neanderthals were stooped, brutish creatures. But, you know, we don't believe that anymore. That was a lot of political and religious kind of stuff from back in the 1800s that caused that. Comparison with modern humans, we different species, conical rib cage, thicker hand bones, wider pelvis, shorter lower legs. There's a lot of differences in the skull. Of course, the shape of the brain case, occipital bun at the back of the skull used for muscle attachments, their noses, the nasal bone projected, and they had no chin. They also had the larger brow ridge. So 550,000 years, after the last mating, we can see measurable impacts on gene expression. If you are living in, if you have a European ancestry, you have up to 5% Neanderthal DNA in you. And let's see, they use radiocarbon dates on the Neanderthal remains. It's one of the only species, because they some of them are below 50,000 years, that were able to do that. And we can tell that Neanderthals did not disappear all at once. So they didn't die out one time. They died off at different times, different parts of the world. Denisovans, now this is a fairly new species discovered. The only thing we have is two. Actually, I think they just discovered a third tooth. So we have a couple teeth and a pinky bone. We know that we have the genome though. So we know that up to 5% of Southeast Asians have they have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. And we can tell how they split by using genetic markers, by sequencing ancient and modern DNA, comparing differences and calculating how much time was needed for the variations to accumulate. Scientists can create timelines for when different populations split. Current model shows genetic splits that would have occurred several generations after the human populations became separated geographically. Over here, we can see back we're right around just before Homo heidelbergensis, with Homo erectus here. Heidelbergensis is right in here. We can see where the Denisovans and the Neanderthals split and where modern humans are. And we can tell this because we have the Denisovan genome, the Neanderthal genome, the modern human genome, and the Homo heidelbergensis genome. Evidence. Homo naledi is a real recent one, discovered in 2013, described by Lieberger in 2015. When they were first discovered, we didn't know how old they were. Again, dated by 6 different methods now. They've got them down to a range between 235 and 335,000 years ago. They were found in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa near Johannesburg. And over 1,500 fossil specimens from 15 individuals are brought up, and Lieberger says there's more down there. There's another fossil Lieberger discovered. That was me right there. I was his opening act at the Mesa Arts Center back in March here, and got to share on the second day with thousands of children talking about human evolution. It's a great outreach thing we do with the museum here in Mesa. This is a Homo naledi skull and hand that were donated by Lieberger to our museum. Again, 6 different dating methods used. Dating methods include electron spin resonance and oxygen isotope analysis, neither of which require us to know initial parent-daughter ratios. Some of the features, again, we're going to kind of breeze through this, but from the waist up, they were almost like an Australopith. Long arms, curved fingers, small shoulders, small head, but from the waist down, they were just like modern humans. And I'm holding a fossil in my hand. Creationists can't figure this out. I'd like to know what Kent thinks about them. We've got the Core Academy of Science over here saying they're fully human. We've got Answers in Genesis saying they're fully ape. They can't figure this out. Institute for Creation Research, they gave up. They said they're imaginary creatures. I mean, scientists have been duped, so they wouldn't even try. So Public access paleontology is what Lee Berger's all about. You can download 3D printable files. They're available for everyone. No more of this hiding fossils and locking them away in safes. Modern paleontology is very open, and we won't see things that happened before happen again as far as not having access to these fossils. Again, over 1,500 specimens, but wait, there's more. The Lissetti chamber. Lee Berger announced more individuals. 3 more individuals were found in a different chamber. He announced that on May 9th of this year. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. This is the little hobbit guy, Homo floresiensis. They nicknamed him the Hobbit because their adults were only 3.5 feet tall, and they had big feet. So we do find them using crude stone tools, though, and fire pits. We find the bones, charred bones with the cut marks on them where they were. We also know now that it looks like they evolved from Homo habilis. They are not a dwarf species of Homo erectus. Now, looking 200 to 300,000 years ago, we had all these different human species alive on different parts of the planet. Example of this happening today would be with baboons. Genetic and fossil evidence shows modern baboons originated in South Africa. As groups became isolated, they diverged into 5 different species. These species may produce offspring in hybrid zones, but some remain genetically isolated. So it takes millions of years for large mammal species to become completely reproductively isolated. Olive baboons in the middle here, they started off as a hybrid. Then they became a very successful species, probably the most. But we see differences in physical traits. We see difference in cultural traits between all these different species of baboons. And I believe it's the same type of thing. I'm not saying we came from baboons. I'm saying I'm comparing what we see currently with baboons with what happened 200 to 300,000 years ago with humans. Genetic evidence, we've completed genomes for all these. Accumulation of neutral mutations occurs with enough regularity to provide a molecular clock. It gives us an estimate of how long ago each species diverged, and it aligns with our known fossil record. And the DNA studies also align with the known fossil record. Archaeology, if we want to talk about bones in the dirt, what can we learn from the study of osteoarchaeology? A lot of times we would know where the person lived, where we found them. We would know when they lived because we can date the fossils. How old they were when they died, a lot of times we can tell that. Sometimes we can tell how they died. We know of, for example, of a murder that occurred in Spain 430,000 years ago. Sometimes we can tell whether they died of disease, whether they were killed, male or female, and we can see primitive versus derived traits, being early traits that we see in species that came before, and then the derived traits would be something that shows up then and continues on after that. Forensic facial reconstruction, because I know there's going to be people saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. It's makes for a great visual presentation too. So dating fossils is done using both absolute and relative dating methods following scientific laws. So if anyone's going to say we can't date these fossils, they've got 2 scientific laws here that they're going to have to show why we should not accept them. For example, in Kubifora, Kenya, over 200 layers of volcanic tuff were dated and chemically analyzed. So we have 200 layers throughout that geological column that they've made just for that area. 200 layers have been dated and tested. Lucy shows up in the middle of the column there, showing up at about 3.18 million years old. All these different layers, we have different thin layers of volcanic ash that can be dated. And this shows where the first family dates a little bit older. The first knee joint that Johansen discovered in 1973 is actually quite a bit older than Lucy was. Testing our theory. How would we test the theory of evolution? And as far as human evolution, we would, to test the hypothesis about the change of kind from early species to modern humans, we would predict that we would find evidence in the fossil record for such a transitional change. We would predict the recent layers would contain modern humans. At some point anatomically, modern humans would cease to exist in the fossil record, and we would only see evidence of species with both those primitive and derived traits, becoming more primitive as the fossils get older, ending up with only these early apes in the oldest layers. That's exactly what we see. We never see human remains in with any of these primitive species or older fossil remains. Never see it. Over 6,000 individuals now we have cataloged in hominin evolution. We're just talking about humans here. If you look at the fossil record as a whole, most creationists will agree to microevolution. Oh yeah, microevolution happens. They have to. I mean, because we see these changes. But if you lined up all these skulls and put them in a row, you're seeing microevolution from one to the other. And if you look at it over it as a whole, it becomes macro. I mean, you can line up Australopithecus on the left, modern human on the right, and every little minor change is a macro change. But you go back and look at the first skull and the last skull, and everybody's going to say, oh yeah, that's a different species. That's macroevolution. We just witnessed a change in kind by studying the fossil record. Australopithecus afarensis female on the left, Homo sapiens female on the right. I don't think anybody's going to disagree that we have two different species there. To argue against this, let me join you, because this march of progress type thing for human evolution is not what we see in the fossil record. It was something that was dreamed up 150 years ago, but we have much more like a bush. It's not a straight ladder-like progression. So again, the difference between us and the other apes is great, but we didn't evolve from them. If you could line up all the hominin ancestors, you could see the transition. If we could stand all our ancestors in front of us today, you could see the transition. So millions of years of human evolution, the evidence cannot be denied. Charles Darwin would be pleased to see the transitional species in the fossil record today, just as predicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was a great presentation. I'm going to give Kent exactly the same amount of time, which is about 20 to 22 minutes or so. Kent, you can use it to do your own presentation or start into rebuttal on Bill's, whatever you feel you want to do. Okay?
Okay, well, thank you so much for letting me be on here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. You sound great.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, well, I appreciate everything he said. I think since the title of this is there evidence for human evolution? I think the word evidence has very clear meaning. In a court of law, absolutely nothing that he shared with us would hold up. He gave a list of things we can tell from these fossils, you know, how they died, maybe how old they were when they died, and I think I would agree with all of that. But he did not have on that list, nor could he put on that list, that you could prove that those specimens that you found had any children at all. Certainly you couldn't prove they had children that lived. And if you're going to claim that these are transitional between something, you have to find not only that they had children or prove they had children, and they also had to find a mate who had the similar characteristics that went on. So lining up a bunch of bones you found in the dirt, everything in his presentation would be thrown out in the first 10 seconds in an honest court of law, because what he found are bones in the dirt. He is putting an interpretation on them that says, oh, they were able to do something back then that no animal today can do. The Bible teaches clearly that before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old. There are all sorts of legends of what is called the Golden Age. They're found all over the world, where different cultures, even people with no contact with Christianized or Hebrew Jewish cultures, would teach, oh yeah, there was a Golden Age when man used to live to be nearly 1,000. And they lived peacefully and died in their sleep kind of stuff. Just Google Golden Age, you'll find a lot of information on that. So the Bible clearly teaches the people lived to be 900. Now, it's also a biological fact that the bones of your head are continually changing and growing and adapting. People that live in a place where they have a coarser diet, like the Aborigines in Australia, have larger eyebrow ridges because of the chewing muscles that attach to the eyebrow ridge from the masseter and the temporalis muscles. It's just simply a matter of either coarser diet or older age. Now, the Bible says clearly in Genesis chapter 1 that God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. All of this effort that Bill puts out and others put out to try to make man a descendant of a monkey, he needs to understand, and I'm sure he does, this is a clear violation of what the Bible teaches, and he's welcome to do that. but I think that's a dangerous position to be in Judgment Day. The evolution theory teaches we are improving and getting better, and someday we get to become like God, which is the same lie Satan told Eve in the Garden of Eden. The reality is, I think humans are getting worse, degrading from what they used to be. Fossils, he didn't mention any of the gigantic fossils that have been found of people 8, 9, 10 feet tall, and there are hundreds of those. So as far as can an ape-like creature turn to a human, well, there's no evidence that any animal today produces something other than its same kind. None of the fossils, as I mentioned, would count. All through the Bible, we have people who live in caves. There are people today who live in caves. It depends what you mean by caveman. So let me just talk about a couple of them. The Nebraska man, which was used for years as evidence for evolution, all came from one tooth. From one tooth, they made Nebraska man, and the entire man and his wife were shown in Illustrated London News back in 1922, scientifically built up from one tooth. Later, they found out the tooth actually came from a pig, the real Nebraska man. I've got a cover on my video number 2 of my series, which you can watch on drdino.com or on all over the internet, about all of the so-called cavemen. They're touted as evidence and really make the news for a while, and then later are discredited or proven wrong. The New York Times ran an article back in 1912, Darwin theory proved true, based on this skulls that they found. It was used in the 1925 Scopes monkey trial. The Dawn man and the Rhodesia man, he went through the same type of evidence back in 1922 to try to prove evolution was true. All of it was later discredited. The Piltdown man was in the textbooks for 40 years. 1956, Reader's Digest ran an article saying, oh, this was proven to be false. It's not true. The Neanderthals, I think most folks who study them would say, yeah, they're probably normal humans, either living to great age or deformed from diseases like arthritis or vitamin deficiency disease. The 13% bigger brain on the Neanderthals is interesting. I think they're just simply pre-flood human, or people who shortly after the flood when they're still living to be 400. So I think the Christians or the biblical view would have a very reasonable answer to this. But again, I would go back to say every single bone you find in the dirt, you could not use it as evidence that it's an ancestor to anybody. None of that would count. In an honest court of law, the judge would say, you're right, no bones found in the dirt count. You did not demonstrate that you could prove that they had any children at all. Especially you did not prove they had children that were different than themselves. So all of that is a bunch of baloney. Now, even if it's true, you couldn't prove it to be true. Now, I don't think it is true, but certainly in a court of law, it wouldn't hold up. And the title of the debate is, there evidence for human evolution? Absolutely not. And they have to go back and define what you mean by evolution. What Bill is arguing here is a very, very tiny step trying to get from apes to humans. Really, the evolution theory has to take you from a rock to a human, and ultimately has to take you from absolutely nothing to a rock. That's why I'm very careful in my debates and discussions to define the word evolution. There are 6 different levels or meanings or stages you would have to go through. And everything he gave to so far was down between what I call number 5 and 6. Number 1 would be cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, matter. They don't like to discuss that, but it is a fact. Before you can have any monkeys or ape-like creatures evolving into humans, you have to have the monkeys or ape-like creatures. Now, where did they come from? They had to come from something earlier, and ultimately, I can show you straight from the textbooks, they do teach they came from a one-celled creature, which came from prebiotic soup. I'm getting a heavy breathing in the background from somebody there. I don't know. Ultimately, they have to say they came from the prebiotic soup. And when you ask them, where did this soup come from? The textbooks teach, well, 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down and it had a hard rocky crust, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup. And the soup got concentrated in little pools via evaporation, concentrated enough that it came alive. So this entire debate on is there evidence for human evolution is a real tiny, almost insignificant part of a much bigger picture. He hasn't demonstrated any scientific evidence for where the material came from, where space came from, where time came from. So I don't think he's demonstrated that humans have evolved to apes. Or apes have evolved, ape-like creatures have evolved to humans. Again, I point out, none of the bones that he found could be proven to have had any children at all. So if he wants to believe that, that's perfectly fine. Now, they are doing a great job of reconstructing these creatures, and they're spending a lot of time trying to put, skin and flesh and hair on them. It's interesting they make them all with dark skin. I think that ought to be offensive to somebody. But I think if you go through one by one and look at these so-called cavemen that he's referring to, you could discredit them. The Aboriginal skulls today look very similar to some of the skulls there because of their coarse diet. And the eyebrow ridge grows larger. That's one bone in your body that never stops growing. It just simply indicates the individual is probably over 200 or 300 years old. So I would ask people to watch my videotape number 2, where I cover all of the cavemen. You can't see all the slides here. I know, I'm sorry about that, but I have done all that. But I guess I'm busy looking at the bigger picture of, and I think, I doubt this will be answered, but how could you prove any of those thousands and thousands of bones you found in the dirt, even if you are reconstructing them correctly? And I won't argue that. Even if they look like they're intermediate between two different kinds of animals. Even if you find one that does look like it's half chimpanzee or half ape or half human. How could you prove they had any children that lived and that produced children again? So you have really 3 stages here. Could you prove they had children? No. Could you prove they had children that lived? No. Could you prove they had children that were able to produce something other than their kind? No. It's absolutely silly on its face. In an honest court of law, this would, the entire presentation, the whole section of his museum would be thrown out. Now, especially when you go back and look at the history of this teaching from the 1860s up until now, so many of these have been used as evidence for a while, and then later found out, oops, that wasn't correct. We made a mistake. I don't know what Lucy was. What he might have proved is that there were lots of other types of apes or monkeys or different types of creatures that have gone extinct over the centuries. He might have clearly demonstrated extinction, but he did not demonstrate evolution at all. Now, the bigger picture here, he's giving all these dates of 1.9 million years ago, etc., and a gradual increase in brain size. Again, it could be he's demonstrating creatures have gone extinct, but it does not demonstrate there any relation to modern humans. And the one thing I don't think people are considering in all of this is, what is the result? He's teaching thousands of children that they are nothing but an animal. And I've asked evolutionists this question all over. Maybe Bill can answer it today. If your theory is true, how do you tell right from wrong on any topic? Is abortion right or wrong? Is premarital sex right or wrong? Is sex with your dog right or wrong? Is murder right or wrong? How, with your philosophical background of thinking we are nothing but an advanced ape-like creature, how do you tell right from wrong on any topic? Is it decided by majority opinion? We all get together and vote on it. Well, then in Nazi Germany, they decided, hey, it's okay to kill people that are not blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans. So they didn't do anything wrong. That was their vote. That was their decision. So is it based on, might makes right? Who's got the biggest muscles or the biggest gun? They get to decide. Is there an absolute moral standard anywhere in the universe, and where did it come from? In his worldview, I think we're just an animal, we're nothing but animated meat, and he has to answer the question, where did the original material come from, the space come from, the time come from, and why don't we see any animals today doing this? Apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, monkeys, humans are all having babies all over the world. Why don't we observe it today? Why is it only bones in the dirt that we're able to do this? I'd like to see it happen today. Okay, I'd like to hear his response. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kent. Go ahead. And you, by the way, you do have about 5 more minutes if you want to say anything else, Kent, for equal time, or you just want to turn over your balance to Bill.
Oh, I've got plenty to say. My seminar is 18 hours long. I cover all
okay. No problem. All right, Bill, you're going to have to unmute because I did have to mute you. There was a little bit of background noise, but it was actually, I think, Kent, you had some background. But while he's unmuting, I do want to thank, we have about 250 viewers right now. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out to listen to this. So, yeah, now, Bill.
Okay. Yeah. Are we there? All right.
Yeah,
I'm going to screen share again. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer the question first. Do we need to know if an individual fossil ever reproduced? Absolutely not. It's just crazy to think that we would look at an individual fossil and have to know whether it reproduced, because every single fossil, or every individual, I should say, is a member of a population. There's no individuals out there living by themselves. And the theory of evolution says that populations evolve over time. It doesn't say individuals give birth to anything else besides themselves. Kent has got a straw man argument there, definitely. You know, he'll say, oh, we have to prove that this individual gave birth to something other than itself. That is not how the theory of evolution works. It's not what it says at all. Again, every individual is a member of a population. The traits that we see in the individual would be present throughout the population, okay? As far as all the other cosmic evolution and all the other baloney, Kent and I agreed to talk about human evolution. So today we're discussing 5 and 6, macroevolution and microevolution. So I'm not going into all the philosophy thing here either. Again, the straw man, dogs will always give birth to dogs. Animals always produce the same kind. Of course they do. Darwin predicted every species would give birth to the same species, but populations change over time. Okay, claims about fossils that they only indicate something died. Bones can't talk. Again, populations evolve, not individuals. We don't have to prove any specific individual had offspring, because every individual is part of a population. Okay, would it hold up in a court of law? Absolutely, it would. We've got an instance here where, you know, remains were found below to the skull. DNA evidence was used. You combine the DNA evidence with the fossil evidence, and the killer was convicted. So bones and genetic evidence combined do not lie. Do we look like Neanderthals as we age? Ken has made the statement many times in his videos that brow ridges continue to grow as we get older. That is false. As years pass, facial bones actually lose volume. Now, what might happen is the eye sockets get larger, and it maybe gives a little bit of appearance of a brow ridge, you know, but the brow ridge itself does not. So if you were to look at the skull, you wouldn't see a large brow ridge like we see with Neanderthals. And chins become more pronounced. Chins don't have, or Neanderthals don't have chins. So it's absolutely not a human that lived to be hundreds of years old. So again, brow ridge prominence due to the diminution in fat and with thinning of underlying tissues, eyes flatten and make brow ridges appear prominent. But if you, over to the right, compare it to the skull, you wouldn't see the difference. You wouldn't see it in the skull. You would see it as an outward appearance. You know what does grow is ears grow, okay? Ears grow, and your nose will continue to grow from gravity, but ears keep growing. Is this what Noah looked like at 900 years old? Because I'm telling you, he wouldn't look like a Neanderthal. He would have looked like that if he was 900 years old. Neanderthal art, they invented the hashtag, you know. I'm not saying they were stupid. They weren't stupid. They were different than us, but they weren't doing cave paintings like we were, you know, right around the same time. So Neanderthals are, the Y chromosome was never passed down. We have their completed genome. We have our completed genome. We can check this. We never see the male Y chromosome from Neanderthals passed down. And again, comparing, these are scientific papers, sequence comparison with human DNA sequences, as well as other analysis shows that Neanderthal sequence falls outside the variation of modern humans. They were not modern humans. There's no way. You cannot make that claim. If you do, you're wrong. So it's funny here because this Jack Quazzo will make claims that Neanderthals were you know, healthier than us, smarter than us, and everything else. And then other people are saying they live to be 900 years old, but they contradict themselves. So I've got more stuff here on the origin. Well, again, we don't have to go to origin of life. Other than I would like to point out, again, that's another straw man that Kent is bringing up, saying that we came from a rock. Do we believe we came from a rock? No, we don't believe we came from a rock. Again, the study of how life began is called abiogenesis, okay? Evolution began when the first single-celled life replicated. Change in frequency of alleles in a population over time. There are many hypotheses on how life began, but not a single one can be reduced to we came from a rock. Straw man argument. Here's one here. they talk about the conditions of life. Here's the Miller-Urey experiment here. It talks about lightning strikes, molecules, organic molecules. The meteorite hypothesis about amino acids that have been found in meteorites. The ocean iron sulfide hypothesis about deep sea vents. Liquid membrane hypothesis about lipids, how they form in spheres and how they could enclose molecules. RNA, the early RNA world, origin of life. Here we go. Not a single one teaches we came from a rock. It's just another straw man. So, Kent?
Kent, you're going to have to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me now? We got too many buttons to push. My computer is not evolving. It requires intelligent input. Well, as far as teaching, we came from a rock. I show in my seminar dozens of textbooks, and I have a huge textbook selection from 1880s on up to today. And they certainly do teach that there was primordial soup that came from getting rained on the rocks, and you can watch my seminar part 1. That is exactly what the book teaches, that life had to come from soup, which came from the dissolving of the rocks. It's interesting, the options that he gave, life coming from outer space, that only postpones the problem. He does have to answer the question, where did life get started? I notice it's interesting, since I started doing my 6 meanings of evolution, the evolutionists have gone nuts trying to say, oh, that's not part of evolution. Well, it has to. You have to have something to evolve. So they never answer the first 4. They give their various hypotheses, which is my whole point. They're welcome to believe whatever they want. But this is a religion. This is not a science. Science deals with things we can observe, study, test, demonstrate, replicate in the laboratory. You can't replicate any of the fossils that he gave in the laboratory and show the Neanderthals had children. His illustration he gave, let's see, the killer was found guilty because of the DNA evidence in a court of law. The killer was found because the skull was crushed, etc. That's the death of an individual. That is so different than trying to prove this child had these bones had children. So that was
we don't need to prove they had.
That was a real straw man argument. I mean, you're setting up a straw man and demolishing it and thinking you won the victory, but you didn't prove any of the Neanderthal skeletons you found had children. You showed that in a court of law, a killer could be found with various DNA evidence. Okay, and if you found that there's DNA similarity between apes, humans, orangutans, chimps, etc., well, if we can demonstrate there's a certain percentage of similarity between all these, okay, what would that prove? Would that prove a common ancestor, or could it prove a common designer? This DNA is so complex, much more complicated than any computer code ever written by man. And yet people just want to dismiss it and say, oh, well, hey, look how similar we are. That proves common ancestor, when actually, I think it's better proof for a common designer, common creator. I think I can demonstrate, if we had it listed out in front of us, all that the code required for Microsoft PowerPoint has millions of, maybe certainly hundreds of thousands of identical lines for Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word. Okay, does that prove they're all evolving from Morse code by chance, or could it be there's a common designer using this code? So even if he, okay, even if he showed that there is a certain percentage of DNA similarity, that doesn't answer the question. It doesn't prove the point at all that there's a common ancestor. He may wish to interpret it that way because he wants to, act like an ape or have no morals or something. I don't know what his motive is here, but I know that that in a court of law, I could simply argue, Your Honor, the similarities he's showing here are evidence of a common designer, common creator. In an honest court of law, that would have to be accepted as, yeah, you're right. So he did not demonstrate that this similarity proves any ancestral relationship.
What do you, what is your explanation for why we don't find a single modern human fossil in the same layers as any of these ancestral species?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who's looking and who's cataloging this and keeping records. You may be correct. I don't know. To my knowledge, no human bones and chicken bones have ever been found in the same rock layer. So that proves humans and chickens did not live at the same time.
You're wrong on that. I mean, we do find, especially in Africa, the remains of a lot of the animals that they've eaten. As far as, I wouldn't know about specifically chickens, but we find the animals that they were eating in the same layers. So we find a lot of different animal bones.
Sure. Could we demonstrate?
I'm sure we
there are thousands of bones. There are thousands of animals alive today that are never found with human bones. So what does that prove? Well, they don't live together. Humans and chickens don't hang out together. And so in a worldwide flood in the days of Noah, they would tend to not be buried together. So not finding the bones together is not evidence of anything. This is arguments from the negative. It wouldn't hold up at all, again, in an honest court of law. Well, we didn't find the gun, so therefore this guy didn't do it. To say that we don't, first of all, I don't know that it's true what you're saying, that human bones are not found in these layers. Secondly,
it's true.
Okay, just because you said it, that makes it true. Bill said it.
No, because the data shows it. I mean, the data shows it. Go out and find some if you don't believe it. You can come back tomorrow and let me know if you've done your research, if you've ever found modern human fossil remains in the same layers as any of these more primitive species. We never have. And you have no explanation for that. None.
I do indeed. I said, who's looking? Who's cataloging this? Is there a motive to hide evidence if it was found? I think
so. A vast conspiracy is your answer?
That's not my answer. That is a possibility. Now, I pointed out, you go do your research and show me where fossils, not living animals, not living people, where fossil humans and fossil chickens have been found together. I'd like to see the evidence of that.
Chickens are pretty recent. I mean, compared to what the fossils we've been talking today. So they evolved from the jungle fowl.
So if no fossil chickens and fossil humans are ever found and fossilized together, would that prove to you that humans and chickens did not live at the same time?
At that same time, yes. But not now, today. I mean,
Bill, chickens are alive today.
Yeah, but we're not fossils. They aren't fossils, and neither are you. So you're comparing two different things. You're saying because we're alive today, we could have existed together 3 million years ago. No, I mean you've got two different things here. So
yes, you are arguing out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying we don't find human fossils with these Lucy fossils, therefore they didn't live together. I'm trying to point out the stupidity of that. Chickens and humans are alive today. I can prove they lived with humans. I ate one yesterday. Yes, humans and chickens live together. Whether we find the bones together or not doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. It really does. I mean, again, you're comparing living things with something in the fossil record. It's two completely different things. So anyway, what is you have no explanation for that, basically.
Well, I do.
So,
there is no such thing as a fossil record. You are putting an interpretation on these fossils. There are billions or probably trillions of fossils in the ground. What does that prove? Well, I think it proves a rapid burial of the whole planet in Noah's flood, because fossils don't form. Show me fossils forming today in any great number compared to like the Karoo Formation, where there are 800 million vertebrate animals found.
Well, where's this flood boundary? If you say there was a flood, where does it end in the fossil record?
I think nearly all of the layers of strata were formed at the same time. There is no fossil record.
All layers?
I said nearly all of those layers formed today in localized floods. Mount St. Helens deposited a thick layer of ash over my sister's yard.
That's not the same at all. That's volcanic. Well, where is the last sedimentary layer that was laid down by this flood you believe in? It should be really obvious, right? I mean,
no, I don't know.
You have no idea. Okay.
No, I think we could probably interpret it, but there are continent-wide layers of strata. Like limestone, I believe, covers most of the 48 contiguous states. One layer of limestone. No,
not one layer.
Well, there are thousands of layers, hundreds of
different layers at different levels and different types of rock. Limestone, shale, Aeolian sandstone all require different environments to be made. They can't be made at the same time in the same year in a single flood. We know that. So I don't know if you really want to go into geology here because we're talking about human evolution. So do you understand that you were wrong about the Neanderthals and their eyebrow ridges growing? You've been saying that for 20 years.
No, I don't think you proved your point at all. You said that did you show a skeleton or a fossil of a human who lived to be 300 to see what happens?
No, we've never seen that.
Correct.
And but we know that their bones stop growing by the time before they're 30 years old. So have you seen, can you show a human that's 70 years old that has large eyebrow ridges that didn't have them earlier? Can you show that?
Would you think that the skeleton of Arnold Schwarzenegger or any bodybuilder, does the pulling of the muscle on the bone, the insertion point, cause the body to respond by adding more bone material? Do the bones get bigger? Not as fast, but do the bones get bigger as the muscles enlarge in a bodybuilder?
Do the brow ridges get bigger? We're talking about brow ridges here.
I asked, do the bones get bigger? Do any bones get bigger? Do any bones respond to muscular pulling?
Well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with what we were talking about? You've changed the subject again.
No, I did not. That's exactly the point. If muscles pull on a bone, the body responds by building more bone there. The fact that you show a picture of a 40 and a 60-year-old woman, the same woman, I don't know what her diet was, but I know that bones do respond to muscles pulling on them. Ask any doctor to x-ray the skeleton of, let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger as an example. I'd be willing to predict, without seeing the x-ray, that the insertion points of the muscles on Arnold Schwarzenegger, on his bones, are bigger than the average person, simply because of muscular stress on the bone. That is a response. That's a biological response the body has to build more bone density. And if a bodybuilder doesn't do that, doesn't build the muscle slowly, he may crack the bones because the skeleton cannot hold up to the muscles. That's a well-known biological fact. So yes, I think that you did not demonstrate that I was wrong, that great age, people living to be 300 years old, which is what I said, people living to be 300 years old could have larger eyebrow ridges because of the masseter muscle pulling or the frontalis muscles. The
Can you demonstrate that?
Well, Can you demonstrate that? Okay, let's go X-ray Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sure, I could demonstrate. Let's get X-rays of the body.
You have a 300-year-old human. You have a 300-year-old human that you can show me that happens to all of them.
Well, I pointed out that bodybuilders' bones get larger. Now, Bill, you're missing a major picture here. I don't have to demonstrate because I'm not using tax dollars to teach my religion. You are using tax dollars to teach your religion to thousands of children coming through your museum. The burden of proof is on you, not me. I'm totally non-funded by taxpayer dollars, and so
I don't think we want to go into taxes.
Oh, so, I'd do that too if you'd like to, but you
talk about some of your presentation that you've brought up where you basically lied to people. I don't know if it's ignorance. I'm not sure if it's ignorance or lie, but we're going to find out here real quick. So
before you go into a straw man argument or attack the messenger argument, the debate today is titled Is there evidence for human evolution?
That's right.
So quit bringing up stuff that you think I'm wrong on and other topics. Stick with the topic. Is there evidence for human evolution?
Do you believe that the radiometric dating methods, including carbon dating, can be used to accurately date these human evolution, the human fossils and human ancestor fossils that we find in the fossil record?
There is radiocarbon found in diamonds. There's no radiocarbon found in diamonds. The radiocarbon dating, answers go all over the scale on carbon dating. First of all, most of the fossils that you show were found way before radiocarbon was even invented.
No, most of the fossils I showed were found in the last 20, 30 years.
Now, this debate, the title is there evidence for human evolution?
Yes.
You have to demonstrate that there is. You demonstrated that a bunch of bones were found in the dirt that look different from us, that maybe look different from current apes or chimpanzees or orangutans. That's not evidence that we came from them. You failed, Bill. You didn't prove your point. You got to prove your point. Is there evidence for human evolution? No. You showed a bunch of bones in the dirt that you would like to believe is evidence. If you look at the movie The Green Mile, the poor guy, the black guy, whatever his name was found guilty of the crime because he's sitting there holding two dead girls. The evidence was misinterpreted. John Coffey. He did not kill those girls. It is
I don't know. I didn't see
common.
You assume that the evidence I presented is not evidence for human evolution. That's fine. You can make your assumption. Do you also assume that carbon dating is flawed and that the methods we use to date these fossils are flawed?
I think there are loads of evidence that carbon dating is not 100% accurate. Dates are thrown out all the time. But now you're trying to go off track. I know what you're trying to do. Okay, we'll stick with the topic. The evidence you shared for human evolution fails on its face. You showed thousands of bones found in the dirt that you are interpreting as our ancestors, but yet you did not prove they had any children. You certainly didn't prove they're ancestral to anybody, let alone you and me. You proved you found bones in the dirt. They died, Bill. They died.
Yeah.
End of story.
Okay, well, let's look at your understanding of these dating methods, okay? This is a slide that you have used for 20 years in your presentations where you claim that 15,380 years was assigned and 21,300 years was assigned to another part of a mammoth, correct? Okay, now we look at the actual paper that it refers back to up here in the upper left, 15,380. Remember that number from your slide? Osborne, 1940. flesh from a lower leg mammoth. Down at the bottom, 21,300. Remember that date? That's from the slide you did. 1948, submitted by Farron, skin and flesh of Mammothus primigenus. I mean, it was a different, okay? And it even says on one, hide soaked in glycerin by collector invalid. It was completely a different animal. So this slide that you've been showing for the last 20 years is wrong, Kent. I'm sorry. Now, are you going to keep showing it? You also,
Bill,
hold on.
Bill, you're off topic, first of all. You're off
topic. Talking about dating.
Bill, hang on one second.
Before you slap and run, like a coward would do, give me a chance to answer. Are you saying that slide you showed from 1940 that they were doing carbon dating in 1940 when it wasn't invented until after World War II?
Ken, it's your slide.
That one.
1949, it says. This is your slide.
Did you look at the article I quoted there from, go back to it one more time.
It was collected in 1940. This one was collected in 1940, yes.
So, but again, you're off topic as far as going to carbon dating rather than human evolution, the purpose of
No, we're using this dating method, and you're saying the dating method's wrong, that we can't learn anything from it, okay?
Do we get incorrect dates ever with carbon dating?
I'm not into that. I don't know. But what I do know is I know the proper way to use the method, and we never date anything living, okay? You also use, as a straw man argument, living mollusk shells were carbon dated at being 2,300 years old. A freshly killed seal was carbon dating. It died 1,300 years ago.
Back up and look at that one again. The freshly killed seal. Go back 2 slides.
Yes. Okay.
Go back 2 slides.
This one?
Well, that one's fine. Science.
Okay.
Science Magazine, volume 141, page 634. I'm just writing down what they said.
Okay. Do you understand how the dating method is used?
I think I do very well. Yes, so we could do a debate on that if you'd like. Now look, go back to that seal. Go to the seal one again. The seal, right there.
Right.
Antarctic Journal, volume 6, September, October, 1971. I'm simply quoting what they said.
Okay.
Don't blame me. That's the Antarctic Journal. I try to document everything.
What can be dated? Samples must be younger than 50,000 years and older than 100 years. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did you know that? Why would you use a freshly killed seal and a live animal as evidence that the method doesn't work?
Why would a live animal?
And presenting a straw man or not?
No, Bill. Why would a live animal give a wrong date? And if a live animal gives a wrong date,
you don't understand the method at all.
I do indeed.
No, you don't. If you just ask why a live animal would give a wrong date, you don't understand the method. The method, when the animal dies, Kent, it starts to deteriorate, carbon 14 to carbon 12. We can't, there's no way you could get an accurate method, a measurement from a live animal. No way. Well, if you don't understand that, you shouldn't even be talking about it. Right there. That one, X. That one, X. Okay?
I understand it very well. Now, if you want to change this topic of the debate to carbon dating, we can do that. But as far as human evolution, if modern humans were carbon dated, if you and I were carbon dated, would we give the same carbon date? We're both living in the same atmosphere, eating the same food. Why wouldn't it work for living? You showed a quote.
It work for living because we aren't dead yet. We're still in equilibrium with the environment.
Okay, then we should give the same. You don't understand
this at all.
I do. Bill, wake up. We should give the same date. We're both in the same environment. We're living, breathing the same air and eating the same food. Yes, we should give the same date, but we won't.
There's no date to give until you've been dead for at least 100 years, Kent.
Think about how silly that is, what you just said. There's no date. It should work on anything. How would you know?
It doesn't work on anything. It works on things that are between 100 years old, dead, 100 years dead, and 50,000 years dead. Okay? It doesn't work on alive.
Think about it. It should. If you and I are living in the same environment, intaking this, we should be in equilibrium with the atmosphere. I agree.
Right.
Are we?
So we can't measure how long we've been dead.
We can measure how much C14 is in us. That's a simple
it wouldn't tell us anything about how long we've been dead. Okay.
It would tell us, are we in equilibrium with the atmosphere? And do you know the atmosphere has always been the same? I think if you watch my slide presentation, you'll see that the atmospheric carbon is still increasing 28 to 37% every year. With the atomic bombs dropped on Japan and other nuclear testing, it has radically changed the amount of carbon in the atmosphere.
I understand that, but I also understand you don't understand how the method's used at all if you think you can get a date of someone that's alive. Okay?
You don't get it.
Probably stop talking about carbon dating because you don't get it.
I know, I get it completely. I don't think you get it at all. Yes, carbon dating is a measurement of how much carbon-14 is in whatever sample compared to the amount in the atmosphere. That is based on the obvious, that's based on real obvious assumptions that we know that the atmosphere has always been the same, and we know that's not true. And
no, we don't assume that.
And we know there's been no contamination.
Yeah, see, we don't assume any of that. I mean, we know differences in the atmosphere, and they account for that. So, but anyway, I mean, obviously you don't understand.
No, I think I do, Bill. Obviously you don't understand. But go ahead. Let's get back to human evolution. Okay. I said none of the bones that you showed would count as evidence in a court of law because you cannot prove it. You changed the subject by saying, well, populations evolved. How do you know that population had something different? You certainly don't know that individual had any children. How do you know? Why would you change it to say the population evolved? You know the individual. I
did not change it. That is what the theory of evolution says. Populations evolve over time. It doesn't talk about individuals turning into something else. That's your straw man. Either you don't understand the theory of evolution or you build a straw man, because we never would say that one species would give birth to another species. No one would ever say that. They say that a species is part of, or an individual is part of a population, and that there's variation in populations, and populations evolve over time. We don't have to prove that an individual fossil had another type of animal, child, whatever, because we would never predict that. If it did, it would falsify the theory of evolution.
Okay, do you think
every time you say that a dog gives birth to a dog, and every kind gives birth to the same kind, you are offering evidence for the theory of evolution.
Do you agree that so far all observed evidence in human recorded history says that dogs have produced dogs? Would you at least go that far?
Well, sure.
Okay. Why do you think it was different long ago and far away? Did dogs?
I don't. I just tried to explain that to you.
Bill, do you believe dogs? Listen carefully. I'll use small words so you can get it. Do you think dogs came? Do you think dogs came from something that was non-dog?
Way back, yes, they did.
What evidence would you have? Why would somebody believe that when we don't observe it happening today? We don't observe the population changing. We observe definite limits. The size and shape and curly hair and straight hair. But
dog populations change. Of course, we're not talking about natural selection here. We're talking artificial selection, of course. But we've seen dog populations change over the last 1,000 years. Don't tell me we haven't.
Have we seen them change to something that is non-dog?
Well, no, we wouldn't expect to.
But yet you do believe dogs came from something that was non-dog.
It takes a lot longer than that. It's just those years that you don't believe in. I think that's one of your problems is you don't have that concept of deep time. Without the concept of deep time, your mind cannot rationalize that we always expect dogs to give birth to dogs, but that species change over time because populations change over time. And I don't think you're able to rationalize that in your mind because you don't understand how old the Earth truly is and how life has been evolving for billions of years.
I think you're using the wrong words there. I don't believe. It's not. I think I understand completely what you believe, but it is your religion, Bill. You cannot prove these billions of years that you need, and you cannot prove that billions of years would even help. Every farmer on the planet counts on evolution not happening. We can speed this process up by using. Let's get something with a shorter generation time, like bacteria. Bacteria reproduce very rapidly, and you can greatly shorten the generation time, and yet all we ever observe are bacteria produce bacteria. Never a two-celled animal, never a three-celled, always one-celled. And what do you believe they came from a rock or from a prebiotic soup?
That's another straw man you got there, because no one ever claims that a one-celled animal went to 2 cells and 3 cells before it became multicellular. We look at sponges today, and that's a colony of cells acting as a group, and acting as one. That's how multicellular life originated. We never would see a 1-cell, 2-cell, 3-cell. See, that's another straw man argument you bring up. I just don't think your followers realize that.
No, I really, you'd like that straw man, that word straw man, I understand. Do you think sponges then, because they're a colony of cells getting together, in a cooperative effort, a colony, as you called it, is that going to explain how we get to multi-cell creatures that have various different organs, that do different functions, that work together, like your heart, your circulatory system?
It could, but that's not my area of expertise. I'm more on human evolution. I just wanted to point that out since you brought up the 2-cell, 3-cell thing. So let's not get too far off track. I'm still wondering where the flood layer is and why you can't figure out why there are in the single modern human in the same layers as Lucy. You know.
Well, again, I said I don't know that they haven't been found. What if a what if a modern human skeleton was found in Cambrian rock? What if it was? What would you do?
It would falsify what we know.
Okay.
Okay. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, you're assuming here, or you're making up, little stories. I mean, what if? Yeah. Okay. I mean,
so if we found a fully formed human skeleton in Jurassic limestone, and let's assume it was, okay, would you then reclassify the limestone as something other than Jurassic? Because in other words,
these are just what ifs. These are fun, aren't they? Well, what if you found? I mean, I could do the same thing you do. I'm not going there. You're just what if crazy scenarios? Okay, I mean, you're still deflecting from the fact that you cannot explain. You can't tell me where the flood layer was. You can't tell me why that we don't find any. If the flood happened, let's say, I mean, in the geological column, if the flood happened, in the layer where Homo erectus was, let's say, okay, wouldn't we expect to find humans? Didn't all the humans on Earth die in that flood? You believe? So wouldn't we expect to find humans in the layers below that?
Well,
see,
again,
we don't find them, Kent. We don't find a single one. Your model predicts we would. Your model's wrong because we don't find a single one.
Well, I point out in my seminar, which apparently you've watched, and I thank you so much for doing that. I think if you keep watching it, we'll get you converted one day. But I think the fact that few human skeletons are found might be evidence that when God made the world, it was full of animals, full of plants, and only 2 people. 1,600 years later, it's still full of animals, still full of plants, and still not full of people. So secondly, I point out that humans are smarter than animals, at least some humans, and they would have figure out a way to avoid drowning till the last and end up on top, and therefore not fossilize at all. In order to fossilize, animals have to be buried quickly. Fully articulated skeletons are found of all sorts of animals, indicating rapid burial before they could decay. Animals today die all the time, and they get dragged all over the woods by the coyotes or buzzards or ants. So
most fossils are not fully articulated. That is actually very rare. Most fossils, and especially most hominid remains, are found fragmented. We find evidence of not cannibalism, but we find evidence that they were gnawed on by other animals. I mean, we find all kinds of stuff. None of what you're saying is true there. Most are not fully articulated fossils.
Don't put words in my mouth. I said fully articulated fossils are found, and they're very common.
No, they're not.
I didn't say all of them are.
What's the percentage of fossils that are fully articulated?
That I don't know. You work in a museum, ask them.
Said they're common. I know from experience they're very rare. So anyway, again, it's just something you've made up and you've got nothing to back it up. So
okay, are any fully articulated fossils found? Where they find all the bones and nearly all the bones.
Almost none.
Almost none. Okay, well, let's do another debate on that. Back to human evolution. I pointed out, I think you dodged the issue by changing the subject. None of the fossils you found are evidence that they had children that are different, and you switched over to say, well, populations evolve. Well, then find me the whole population.
I never switched. That's the theory of evolution has said that all along. Okay. All along, populations evolve. It's ridiculous to say that we would have to prove this individual evolved. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, you don't understand the theory of evolution.
You're using that individual as part of your evidence. It doesn't count as evidence.
All individuals are part of a population. There's no such thing as an individual out there that just, what are they going to reproduce with? I mean,
good point. Excellent.
Go out and find me an individual anything in this world today that isn't part of a population.
Okay. Tom Hanks did one where he got stuck on an island for a long time. There's one right there. Poor guy had to live on that island for all that time.
And there were no other humans alive at all. There were no other humans alive at that time.
Not on that island, there weren't.
Okay, Kent.
Well,
didn't make any sense.
If the purpose of the debate is for you to demonstrate that the question, if I have it written down right, is there evidence for human evolution? My take is it depends what you mean by evolution, but no, as far as the general theory of evolution goes, none of these bones you showed are proof. You believe, you imagine, you think, you hope, you dream that they're part of a population that evolved. Well, there's a whole population of hamsters in the world today, and they reproduce pretty quickly. I used to raise them. Do we see hamsters evolving into anything non-hamster?
Of course not.
Why not? They would reproduce in a much shorter generation time than humans or bacteria. Our bacteria, which have a really short generation time, is the population of bacteria changing to something non-bacteria?
Well, we demonstrated clearly that Australopithecus evolved into modern humans by macro. Sure, we did.
You didn't demonstrate anything in your mind. In your mind, you did.
Do you accept macroevolution?
No. What do you mean accept? You mean believe? You're using the wrong.
I mean micro. Do you accept microevolution?
I believe that microevolution, if you mean by that variations happen within we'll call it a kind. Sure, there are big dogs, little dogs. I don't think they'll ever get a dog as big as an elephant. I don't think they'll ever get a dog as small as a flea. I think there are limits. There are living animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant, and there are living animals as small as a flea, like a flea. But the dog population varies within certain definite limits. The human population varies within definite limits. There are some pretty short humans, microcephaly, people down to 2.5 feet tall, I believe. Do you think you'll ever get a human that's 1 inch tall? There are animals that are 1 inch tall. Why don't we get humans? Will you ever get a human as big as an elephant? Are there any limits to this variation within the human population? Of course there are. There are limits with every population. The Bible says 10 times in the first chapter that they will always bring forth after their kind. Now, whether kind is identical to species, family, genus, or whatever at different levels, I don't know. Carolus Linnaeus made up our current classification system, and it may or may not match the biblical definition of kind. But most 5-year-olds know that a dog, a wolf, a coyote are the same kind of animal, and a dog and a banana and a dog and a giraffe are not the same kind. I think we can demonstrate that in observable science, all animals produce after their kind.
Of course they do.
Well, then
every time you say that, you're validating Darwin's theory of evolution.
I'm contradicting Darwin's theory. Darwin said...
Not at all. Then you don't understand, because I've tried to explain it.
I understand it.
I don't expect you to understand this, and I don't expect you to accept it. I don't expect you to change your mind, because I know that would never happen. This is your business. I mean, but, I do hope to get through to some of your followers to where they see this today, see what happened today. I've explained to you over and over that every species will reproduce the same species. That is what's predicted, but populations change over time. And you keep coming back with, we never see anything give birth to something else. We never see a dog give birth to it. I mean, I keep correcting you, and it just doesn't sink in.
It sinks in fine. You're not correcting me at all. You're going off track. You said we said we don't expect individuals to change, but you expect populations to change. That cannot be demonstrated. I think we can demonstrate today with every farmer in the world that raises cows expects cows, and yet you think the whole population can somehow shift to something else. This is not science, Bill. I don't know. You're the one who believes it. You believe populations can change to something else. Show me any evidence.
Over a long period of time. Well, it happens all the time. We do that.
You have to hide it. You hide it in deep time. You don't observe it.
No,
it's not
hiding it in time.
You are hiding it.
You can't wrap your mind around it. You don't understand it because you just can't wrap your mind around the amount of time that's required, because the amount of time actually happened.
You believe. You don't know that. You believe that time happened. There's all kinds of indicators the Earth cannot be billions of years old. I covered that on my video number 1. But you said, this is my business. Bill, you get paid by tax dollars. I
do not. I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid by any tax dollars.
Wonderful.
I volunteer, sometimes several days a week. But don't accuse me of being supported by your tax dollars that you never paid.
Oh, I pay plenty of tax dollars. That's never been a problem. Schools are supported by real estate tax.
Never been a problem. All right. Well, anyway,
go to KenHovind.com. So could I come volunteer at your museum and give tours and talk about these fossils? Would they let me come do that?
No, you're not qualified.
Not
I would
qualified.
have to approve you to do that at our museum, and I would never do that. So
Okay.
we don't
Well,
believe the Earth is 6,000 years old and people rode dinosaurs, and that's what you teach.
well, you will believe that one day. Now,
No, I won't.
so I pointed out the debate topic is there evidence for human evolution? There are two words there. We need three words, actually. Evidence. No, you didn't give evidence. You gave a theoretical presentation. You found a bunch of, you didn't prove or demonstrate at all that these, even you didn't prove the population changed. You believe it did. You found a bunch of individuals that look a little different. Okay, end of story. Throw that evidence out. And then what is exactly a human? At what point did these ape-like creatures become human? Is Neanderthal where it started?
No.
Okay, and you never answered my question. If what you're teaching is true, where do you get your moral standard or right and wrong? Is murder right or wrong? Were the Neanderthals murdering people?
Well, that has nothing to do with that's another great topic we could talk about someday, but has nothing to do with human evolution at all as far as what we're discussing. So again, you're just trying to change the topic.
No, I'm pointing out the moral implications of your topic. The moral implications of what I teach is, hey, there's a God. He made this place. He makes the rules. We're going to stand before him one day. We better read his rules and do what he says, because there is such a thing as an absolute right and wrong. Thus saith the Lord.
You're welcome to those assumptions.
I believe that's true. And you're welcome to believe that deep time will change a population, but that's not observable. It's not science, Bill. This is
we see it happening on smaller scales today with other animals, so there's no reason to believe it wouldn't. So I think
what population is changing? What population of other animals is changing? Don't slap and run now. What population of animals today is changing on a smaller scale into something different than its kind?
Nothing is changing into something different than its kind, because we wouldn't expect that.
You just said it was.
But we see.
You just said.
No, we say, I'm talking about, no, I didn't say it was changing into a different kind. The populations are changing. That's what you said. We see that. We see that with lizards that have been isolated on islands. We see it with isolated populations of all kinds of things. How many species of frogs are there? Why are there so many species of frogs? Because they're isolated populations. They're all changing and adapting to their environment. We see it happening today. We don't see a frog turning into a dog, because we wouldn't expect that. That's what you keep asking for. So,
okay, now,
again, I don't know how much clearer I can make it.
Okay, make it clear to me on this one. How do you decide right and wrong on topics like, is premarital sex right or wrong? Is sex with your daughter right or wrong? And where's your standard for making this decision? If I said to you, Bill, is it okay for you to have sex with your 12-year-old daughter? How would you make
I believe that, Kent, you failed to effectively dispute the validity of the current fossil evidence. I did present evidence, okay? We both have the same data. You're going to have to admit that we have the data. It is evidence. You offered no explanation for why modern humans only appear in the upper layers. Whether you accept...
Bill, can't we get a little background noise?
What?
We're
That's not coming from me.
No, I know it's from Kent. We're getting close to the 90-minute mark, and unfortunately, both of you guys did agree to only 90 minutes, so I have to keep you guys to that.
That's fine.
You want to start? I'll give you 5 minutes each for closing statements, because you went first. Kent gets to go last. So, Bill, do you want to give your 5-minute closer, and then Kent will get the last word in with the closer. Okay.
Well, he's going to say the same thing you just did. But again, I presented the data. I presented evidence. I think everyone can see there is evidence, whether he's going to agree with it or not. Whether you accept the dating age results of the dating methods or not, you have to respect the law of superposition. Kent did not address the law of radiometric dating. He didn't address the law of superposition. That says that there's a fundamental law of geology stating that in any undisturbed sequence of rocks deposited in layers, the youngest layers on top, the oldest on bottom, each layer being younger than the one between it and older than the one above it. We only see Australopithecines in layers much lower than modern humans. We see a gradual change in time from Australopithecines to early Homo to modern Homo. I mean, it's all right there. It's easy to see. We see the increase in cranial capacity. We see the increase in different traits. Again, we see species appear in layers above with primitive traits combined with new or more derived traits, which are changes that begin at that time and continue in the layers above. none of them in the layers below. That's all evidence for evolution. We see it over and over and over again in an unbroken chain of transitional forms leading to modern Homo sapiens as the other species disappear. The last of the Australopithecines disappear in the middle layers we discussed, giving way to only the genus Homo above. Throw away all the dates assigned to the fossils. That fact still remains. Can explain it. The idea that, well, we just haven't found it yet, or who's looking, and or the vast conspiracy is just baloney. I only covered fossils from the Pliocene and Pleistocene. To my knowledge, creation scientists consider that post-flood. If Kent's got any other ideas about it, I'd like to hear about it, because pretty much they were all considered post-flood by the other flood geologists. So without an explanation for why we don't find modern human fossils in the same layers as we do the more primitive species, Kent's whole Hovind theory just falls apart.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Kent, you want to take 5 minutes and have your closer?
The mic on. Did I get the mic on? Right button here. Okay. My computer is not evolving without some intelligent input. Sorry about that. And it's a little beyond my scope of abilities here and some of this stuff. Okay, yes. He said, we find evidence for evolution in the layers. On its face, that is a ridiculous argument. You find bones in the dirt. You find lots of bones in the dirt. That is not evidence for evolution. That is evidence that there are bones in the dirt. And we can put interpretations on them. The creationists can say, oh, these bones probably drowned in the flood of Noah, or a flood of some kind. Otherwise, they wouldn't be preserved at all. So they're not evidence of anything changing. You see bones in the dirt, and you put an interpretation on them. Now, I think his statement that the youngest layers are on top is patently false. It's been demonstrated at the laboratory north of Colorado, or north of Denver, Colorado. The Navy has a research laboratory to talk about sedimentation in underwater, so that they can know where to hide their submarines and which valleys are filling in, etc. And they demonstrate that horizontal movement of sediment-laden water will deposit 15 or 20 layers at a time, horizontally. So you could obviously have a layer on top that is much older than a fossil on top that is much older than a fossil on the bottom, because of the horizontal displacement of sediments. During Noah's flood, it has been estimated that with a globe covered with water, if the earth were smoother and covered with water, and there's plenty of water to cover the earth about 8,000 feet deep if you smoothed it out, that the moon causing the tides, the 200-foot tidal bulge would result, staying under the moon as we turn. This would result in vertical displacement and horizontal movement, both. Because as that bulge comes up, the water has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the side. So as far as the people on the earth are concerned, the tide is moving. As far as the moon is concerned, the tide is staying right under it. This would cause rapid sedimentation, thousands of feet of sedimentation over 1 year. The existence of fossils, period, is a great evidence of a flood. But I'm not asking for my theory to be taught at taxpayer expense. Bill is asking for his, and I call it a religion. It is a religion. We don't observe any animals produce different kinds. He believes it would happen long ago and far away, or if you give it enough time, which is demonstrating clearly that it's a religion. It's something you have to believe in, and he's welcome to believe that. I don't care what he believes. But it's not science. It shouldn't be included in part of science, and it certainly shouldn't be required learning at taxpayer expense, which is what it is today. So our ministry, Creation Science Evangelism, uses the evidence for creation as a means of evangelism. We would like everybody to be saved and get to know the Lord and go to heaven. With Bill's theory and the evolution theory in general, Joseph Stalin, who killed, say, 60 million of his own people, died peacefully in old age. He's done. It's over with. Adolf Hitler did not too peacefully, but there's no final judgment. I think it's something innate in humans to say, you know, these bad guys, something ought to happen to them. There ought to be a final reckoning. But if Bill's theory is true, then millions and millions of criminals and bad guys down through history got by with it. In my theory of history, no, nobody gets by with anything. We're all going to stand before God one day. And you can choose to believe whatever you want. But Jesus said clearly that the creation of Adam was the beginning of the creation. Matthew 19:4, Mark 10:6, Exodus 20:11, in the Ten Commandments, God said, He did everything in 6 days. He wrote that on a rock and with his own finger and gave it to Moses. So I think certainly what Bill teaches and what others teach, you're welcome to believe that. But you need to understand, it's a religion, it's not a science, it's something you believe in. Number two, it is completely calling Jesus a liar, which you're welcome to do. But I don't think that will bode well for you Judgment Day. I take the position that not only were we created by God, he wrote a book and told us how he did it, and he preserved that book all through the centuries, and we're going to stand before him one day. Now, if Bill is right and there is no, we just evolved from ape-like creatures, I've not lost anything. I've lived a wonderful life. I'm happily enjoying life and building our Creation Science Evangelism Museum in Lenox, Alabama. I was in Pensacola for 30 years. So come visit, and we're not using any tax dollars to do it. We're just teaching the truth that, hey, God made the world. The Bible says in 2 Peter that the scoffers in the last days, and I would put Bill in that category, the scoffers are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment. Now, Bill, it's my duty as a child of God to warn you, you will stand before God one day, and he has a record of every word you've ever said, every thought you ever thunk, and every deed you ever did, especially when you're teaching children things that are going to cause them to doubt the Bible. I don't think that's going to bode well for you Judgment Day, and I'm very concerned. Now, you're welcome to do that, and you'll continue whether I want you to or not. But I think what you're teaching is dangerous to the young minds that are coming through that museum. You need to really think about what God's going to say about that Judgment Day. So if people want to get our materials, drdino.com, D-R-D-I-N-O. They can watch my YouTube every night, 7:30 Central Time, on Kent Hovind Official. Well, we uplink it from there, but we're so far in the country, it sometimes takes all night to upload. But Kent Hovind Official, watch our YouTube. We'll be glad to, and you can send in questions. We'll be glad to answer. I don't think anything Bill said today demonstrated the purpose of the debate was, is there evidence for human evolution? I don't think he gave any that would hold up in any honest court of law. So I think I won.
All right, thank you, Kent.
Bill, I would disagree.
Hang on, Bill. Unfortunately, that was his closing statements. I do want to thank all the people that were watching. We had several hundreds of people watching this particular debate, and I'm humbled that the turnout was this extensive. Please like this video, subscribe, no matter who you think won. Leave comments in the video description. We'd like to get feedback from you all. I did put Kent's channel in the video description, so if he'll be uploading this video on his channel at some point. I will be having an after show in about a half hour, maybe a little bit less. Everybody's invited to that. And I want to thank both of the debaters for coming out and doing this debate today, Kent and Bill. I think both of you did a great job. And with that, I want to thank my listeners as usual. And I will see you guys tomorrow, or actually later on in the debate.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.